Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk About It, the video program that brings you information to help you live your best life. I'm your host, Stephanie Powell, and today we are talking about mindfulness. What is mindfulness? What are the benefits of it? And how do we practice mindfulness? Joining me today is Jason Kreiselman, someone I've known for a few years. Actually, a mindfulness group is one of the things that brought us together. Jason is a student and a practitioner of mindfulness, and he would be the first to tell you that he is not a mindfulness expert. And while I do know a few experts and gurus in this area, I deliberately chose Jason as my guest to talk about mindfulness because he is someone with whom we can probably all relate. He wasn't gifted with any special talent in this area. In fact, he knew very little, right, Jason? Very
Yep,
little at
until
the
very recently.
start until very recently about mindfulness. But for his well being, Jason has developed, maintained, and is now reaping the benefits of a mindfulness practice. He will share his story with us, and perhaps we'll see ourselves in parts of his story as he tells us about his journey to mindfulness and what he's learned. Jason, welcome to Talk About It.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, Jason, let's get right in. You
Sure.
know, mindfulness is something, it's been getting a bit more attention lately, has it
Yes,
not?
very much so.
We we're hearing about its usefulness not only for individuals, but also for businesses and schools and communities. So let's just start with the fundamentals if we can, and just
Sure.
give us a basic description. Just tell us, what is mindfulness?
We've heard the term so much, but a lot of us don't even know what it means. It's really just consciously and intentionally paying close attention to what's happening in the present moment without judgment, without pushing anything away, without holding on to anything. And it's really just this noticing of things with a sense of openness and curiosity, like where we are, what we're doing, what our mental state is, without reacting strongly to anything. And I think it might be helpful if I give a quick example to kind of
Certainly. Oh,
pull this
great.
and these concepts into a real world situation. Would that be good?
Please do. That would be great. Please.
Sure. So, most of us have driven a car and we can just picture ourselves driving down the highway, minding our own business. All of a sudden, someone cuts us off. Okay.
Oh boy.
So, our initial
Mhm.
reaction, we can feel some tension build up in our bodies. We may get angry and we
Yes.
start kind of we enter into this tornado of thoughts like, oh, I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to cut this person off too. What an idiot. On and on and on and on. And this thinking
Mhm.
process kind of feeds our emotional response and just keeps this anger and this tension going. Okay. So
Right.
that's kind of our
Okay.
default state of being. So let's rewind. We're on the highway again.
Okay.
And now
Okay.
we're going to inject some mindfulness into this situation. So the same
Okay.
person cuts us off.
Mhm.
And we have this reaction immediately where we, feel some tension, maybe feel some anger. But because we're mindful, we're able to kind of hit the pause button and we're able to
Mhm.
step back and we're able to kind of view this situation more mindfully. And rather than
Mhm.
starting to spin up all these thoughts and these what if scenarios, we kind of just pay attention to our emotional response and then we slowly let it go. And by not spinning up this thinking, it kind of takes the energy away from this emotion, and we're able to get back to a calm state and enjoy the rest of our ride home, and then not arrive home to our families, all tense and angry.
Right.
We were mindful, and now
Mhm.
we're back to a calm and composed state.
And can we rewind just a little bit, Jason, when you talked about not invoking judgment? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Judgment and analysis and actively pushing things away or holding on to things kind of takes us out of this present moment. And we're kind of living in this future situation, or we're ruminating about the past. And, the only reality is right now. The past and the future, they only exist in our mind. So by kind of stopping this judgment and analysis, it brings us back to this present moment. And that's more of a place of equanimity. That's a word that you'll hear a lot with mindfulness. And it essentially just means calmness and composure in the face of whatever life throws at us.
So you talked about equanimity. You talked about in the car scenario, um, getting calm, being in the present, getting centered. Could you tell us what are some of the most common benefits beyond that?
So, we already touched on this a bit, but I want to reemphasize how probably the primary benefit is it breaks us out of this state of habitual distraction, and this leads us to be able to experience the fullness of the present moment. Oftentimes we are in this kind of autopilot mode where we're just doing things mindlessly, doing this, washing the dishes, not really paying attention to what we're doing. And mindfulness lets us kind of not get wrapped up in the stories we tell ourselves when we ruminate about the past or get wrapped up in all these future scenarios. And we can hit that pause button and we are able to choose to consciously respond to whatever life throws at us. And the reason I'm mentioning this again is because that state of being can improve all different aspects of your life, from your relationships to your family life, to your school life, your work life. When you enter that kind of state and you separate yourself from this tornado of thoughts, you're able to approach challenges with a greater sense of composure. And then this mental state, this calm mental state, can kind of trickle down and have effects on our entire body. There's studies out now that are showing how mindfulness could potentially improve our immune systems. There's studies out now that are looking into whether mindfulness can potentially stave off, dementia or cognitive decline. And I guess the final benefit for me is something that I like to call beginner's mind. And
Okay.
kind of if you think of how, if you take a child to the zoo, for example, they get so excited when they see these animals. It's like the most amazing thing in the world. But because
Right.
us as adults, we're so conditioned, you're like, oh, that's a zebra, that's a giraffe. Mindfulness lets us to come back into our senses in the present moment and kind of almost reawaken to the magic that surrounds all of us. We are able to
Right.
see ordinary things in a new light, and it allows us to cultivate feelings of gratitude and wonder.
I know in my practice, one of the things that it's led to better decision making for me.
Absolutely.
Like you said, when you're calm, when you're present, you just make better decisions when you're in a rational mindset.
Right.
And so, like you said, it transfers into all facets of your life. I'm even mindful. I have a lot of stairs in my home. And trust me, Jason, I've had a couple of tumbles,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is just walking fast, not paying
Yeah,
attention.
your mind's in a
And
different
now,
place and you're not paying attention to the movement.
yes, so I'm into mindful walking now. And since I've been into that, I haven't had those tumbles that I've had. And it's interesting, we are living in an age where multitasking is the thing. It's produce, perform, perform,
Exactly.
get as many things done as possible. So what you're talking about is kind of in a way counter to the multitasking that we've been
Yeah.
told is so fantastic.
And recent studies have shown that multitasking really does not work. We have the illusion of getting two things done at once, but in reality, we're actually performing poorly on doing two things simultaneously. So when we dedicate ourselves fully to doing one thing, we can, be more fully present with that one activity, like the walking that you just mentioned. And that kind of brings us into a great benefit for seniors and folks that may not have the best mobility, just bringing mindfulness movement into your life and just really saying, okay, I'm going down the stairs now. I'm going to deliberately pay close attention to this experience. That could potentially prevent falls. And we all know with seniors, falls can kind of trickle down and lead to bad outcomes. So
Yeah.
that's a really great benefit for seniors.
Yes. And you spoke too about staving off dementia and kind of the health benefits too. I would imagine that it helps with memory. and which is always a good thing, probably for both seniors in their later stages of life, as well as for the younger generation who
Yeah,
have to, memorize things and they're
absolutely.
learning in a different stage of their learning.
Absolutely.
So,
One thing you just mentioned, younger folks, especially even with just young kids, I'm talking like 5 or 6 year olds,
mhm,
just for them to be self-aware of their emotions, just be like, for a young child to recognize clearly that she or he is happy or sad
mhm,
or upset.
mhm.
That's huge.
It
A lot of
is.
kids,
It
they're just
is.
happy or sad. They think that's them. But for a child to recognize that that's just this state of mind that will pass is huge. And, it's helping them kind of better manage their behavior and emotions better. And, they're starting to develop this emotional maturity earlier on.
Yes, absolutely. So, we talked about mindfulness in general, its benefits. It's time to get a little personal. I want you to tell us, if you can, about your journey, Jason.
Sure.
What led you to mindfulness?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned in the very beginning, I found mindfulness relatively recently, but I'll kind of walk you through where I came from and what that point was where it kind of like opened up my mind to this new way of being in the world. So, I was kind of on the path that many of us fall into, where we're always working towards this future state. We go to a good school, we get a good job, we start accumulating things, and that's all well and good, but you get to a point where you start wondering if there's more out there. So I was
Yeah.
working as an engineer for probably 6 years, and I just came to a point where I needed a life transition, just something different.
Sure.
So, as an engineer does, I joined the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
um,
Don't.
So yeah, I shipped off to southern Ecuador, where I
Oh,
lived for
wow.
almost 4 years. And just
Wow.
looking back on that experience, it's still one of the best things I've ever done. It really just opened my
Mhm.
mind to different ways of living and being in the world. And I remember explicitly experiencing these moments of pure joy there. And I think it
Mm.
was because I was experiencing life more fully, if that makes sense. I think I was able to slow down a little bit and
Mm.
more fully experience kind of simple everyday things. So there was more
Mhm.
time to just be instead of this
Yeah.
constant doing that we find ourselves
Yeah.
in. So that was a
Yeah.
great period of my life where I kind of was mindful without knowing it. Then after that, there was a huge transition. I moved up to Washington, D.C. to attend grad school.
That's
And
huge.
this was quite the change for me. I was very stressed. I was working multiple jobs. I was taking classes in the evening, doing papers on the weekends, trying to manage some semblance of a social life. I definitely had, I definitely suffered from, some anxiety from time to time. And, I sought ways to de stress, but this was primarily by like going to the gym, exercising, and that
Mhm.
definitely helped. But I guess there was still like this background mental tension.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember it might have been towards the end of grad school or when I first started a full time job. I had attended this meditation class at this little meditation center near my house. It was the first
Mhm.
time I'd ever done anything like that. Just kind of
Mhm.
stumbled in one day out of curiosity. And I just remember feeling just very at ease, calmer, more composed after that class was over.
Sure.
And then in my full time job, I joined this meditation group. And, I definitely struggled with it initially. I felt agitated. It was very hard to relax into it, but I guess I stuck with it because I felt like there was something interesting to learn there. So
Okay.
then I think the real turning point for me was probably let's say like 5 years ago or so. I read
Mhm.
this book called The Power of Now by Eckhart
Yeah.
Tolle.
Yeah.
And that kind of explained a lot of the concepts that we talked about earlier in here, just about the power of being in the present moment, being an outside observer of your thoughts. Everything is just this transitory experience. So that opened my mind to all those concepts. And about the same time, I downloaded this app called Headspace, which is a meditation app. And it's set up like a course. So each meditation session kind of builds on the next one. And through that, I just learned so much. I was able to, connect with my breath, connect with the sensations in my body, objectively observe my thoughts and emotions, noticing how they just come and go. Over time, I became less attached to them. And I think this really helped me form a new relationship with that anxiety that I previously mentioned. Rather than trying to actively push it away, I could just take a step back. And when that kind of tense feeling came over me, I could just kind of notice it. And just like that example on the highway that we just spoke about in the beginning of this session, by just noticing it and not getting wrapped up in thoughts and thinking about it, kind of takes the energy away from that anxiety. And there's just really a lot of freedom and self-empowerment in that. And just I guess to finish up the story, now I'm just kind of intentionally integrating more mindfulness into my whole life. I think the half-life of my negative emotions is significantly shorter because I'm able to notice them as they arise and kind of hit that pause button, take that step back, intentionally respond to difficult situations, kind of stop that spiral of negative thinking in its tracks. And what's awesome about mindfulness is it's not this obscure thing that you just do for certain periods. You can take it into any activity, whether it's, taking a shower or washing the dishes or going for a walk. You can just do those activities in this relaxed way with this heightened level of attention to the present moment.
How mindfulness help you deal with anxiety. I like how you described how you just, when you're in those anxious moments, how you just kind of step back from it and just kind of look at it and just calm yourself in a way that it steadies you.
Sure.
And how you just kind of press the pause button, and now through your mindfulness practice you kind of shorten the lifespan, so to speak, of those moments. Like you said, it's something that you practice and you get better with it in time.
The practice is so key because, I can say that like, oh, I can just turn off anxiety, but it's not as easy as that. You really need to practice this, and it needs to become like a new way of living, essentially. And without the practice, it's going to be hard to just notice when you become overwhelmed, and you won't even notice that you're stuck inside that tornado of thought, So the practice is really key to allow you to step back and view things a little more objectively.
For those watching this who are saying, I want to be more mindful, what are some other ways they can learn the ins and outs of mindfulness and maybe ultimately develop a mindfulness practice? What are some other things they can do?
One of the best things that I'd recommend is, we want to turn off this autopilot that we've been talking about. We want to pay attention. And like I said, it's a new habit that you need to form. And I don't know if you ever heard of habit stacking, but essentially that means, we already have daily routines. So for example, every day we may take a shower or brush our teeth, or there's things that we just do. They're part of our daily routine. So in order to help you build a habit, you can kind of tack on a new activity to those habits you're already doing. So rather than having to carve out a new period of time in your day to practice meditation or mindfulness, you tack it on to something you're already doing, such that you remember to do it. So this could be, every time you take a shower, every time you brush your teeth, every time you sit down to eat. And then just consciously choosing to pay closer attention to that activity. That's really all it comes down to. It's just paying attention more closely. We've talked a lot about how paying attention can transform the way we move through the world. And that's really all it is. But in order to do that, I feel like it needs to become this habit. And I think habit stacking is a great way to do it. Another thing you can also do is pay attention to moments of transition. And this could be,
Okay.
walking through a door, getting up from your desk, getting into your car.
Oh,
It's where one activity is kind of ending and something else is beginning. And there's this
mhm.
boundary moment. So in those
Sure.
moments, we can just kind of, check in with ourselves, see where our mind is in
Mhm.
that moment. Am I, running through my to-do list and planning what's for dinner and worrying about, a job interview that's coming up 2 weeks from now? Or am I
Mhm.
here right now and paying attention to what I'm doing? So I think either habit
Mm.
stacking or paying attention to these boundary moments or both can really be a way
Mhm.
to actively choose moments in your life to pay attention. I actually have a quote written down that I was going to use at the end of this, but I think it's
Oh,
really applicable right now. So
okay. Please share it.
this is from the Buddha,
Okay.
and it
Mhm.
goes: praise and blame, gain and
Mhm.
loss, pleasure and sorrow come and go like the wind. To be happy, rest like a giant tree in the midst of them all. So I think that's a really good way to view all of this.
Mm.
If
Mm.
you are like this mighty oak that's just sitting there firmly rooted in the ground, you're able to
Mhm.
see all the craziness of the world go by, but
Mhm.
you're not getting wrapped up in all this crazy,
Mhm.
you know? You're just
Right.
able to
Right.
like observe it. You're there,
Right.
you're calm, you're composed,
Mhm.
and you can just move through life with a little more ease that way.
Yes. And stay firmly rooted through
Exactly.
all of it. Yes.
Exactly.
That's a wonderful, wonderful quote. Wow.
Yeah.
Jason, let's put this in kind of practical terms,
Yeah.
through an exercise.
Sure.
If you can, and you've given us wonderful examples here. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure they're just key takeaways that people will certainly remember. But before we wrap up, if
Sure.
you could just take us through an exercise to just really crystallize the concept of
Yeah.
mindfulness, could you?
So I have an orange right here. You
Hmm.
know, in
Hmm.
our normal everyday life, we'll mindlessly, be scrolling on our phone, peel this thing, scarf it down, and it's over. We barely noticed what it
Right.
smelled like. We barely noticed what it tasted like. Okay.
Okay.
But now,
Yeah.
if we try to inject mindfulness into this experience of this orange, first off, we can, enter into the present moment by being fully in our senses. We can
Okay.
feel the weight of the orange, the texture
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
skin. We can, look at it and be grateful for these eyes that we have that are able to
Hmm.
experience this amazing array of colors around us. When we pierce the skin, we'll notice that beautiful mist that kind of comes off and that
Hmm.
citrusy sweet scent. And
Hmm.
once again, we can be amazed at our nose that's able to sense. I think there was a study a couple of years ago, the nose can sense over 1 trillion different molecules. And then our brain can
Wow.
transform those molecules into our sense of scent. So just being fully in our senses with the orange is the first step.
Mhm.
And then we can even expand our awareness. So we
Mhm.
consider the mother of the orange tree.
Yes.
And we can think about how that tree could not exist without the earth that it's rooted in and the water that
Mm.
its roots extract from the ground and the clouds and the rainfall that gave rise to that water. And then we can consider the
Mhm.
leaves of the tree and
Yes.
how they're pulling in carbon dioxide from our atmosphere and releasing oxygen into the atmosphere that tons of beings pull into their lungs all around the world. And
Mhm.
what's amazing to me is those leaves are able to capture, photons of light that have traveled across the entire vacuum of space at the speed of light, like 100, I think it's 186,000 miles per second from this gigantic ball of fire that's millions of miles away. That just sounds
Yeah.
like a fairy tale. That doesn't even sound like
Yeah.
reality. And then
It
we can
is.
think about the bee that pollinated the flower and the soil organisms that break down the leaves. And then we can
Mhm.
expand our awareness to, our human family, and we can be grateful
Yeah.
for the person that picked the fruit and the person that
Yeah.
packed the fruit. and the people that drove the truck or flew the plane to bring the fruit to the city that we're in. And we can even start thinking about the engineers and the visionaries that invented those amazing forms of transportation, and their teachers and parents, and so on and so on and so on. And you can see that how mindfulness has completely transformed my experience of this orange. So rather than mindlessly eating this, I can now see deeply into this orange and realize that what I'm holding is nothing short of a miracle, you know?
Yeah.
It's just part of this immense web of interconnections. And considering all of that helps me to cultivate a sense of gratitude, a sense of awe, humility, reverence, and just really absolute wonder. You know, this orange is really a product of the entire universe. You know, wow, it's really something else. So you can just see how, you know, mindlessly label it an orange, eat it, move on. Mindfully is this amazing full experience. And I'm not telling you to do this every single moment of your life. You'd never get anything done. But even if you're able to add 5 or 10% more mindfulness into your ordinary everyday activities, it can really be, you know, transformational. So I hope that was a helpful activity that kind of brought a lot of the stuff we've been speaking about together.
That brings it home, Jason. That brings it home beautifully.
Yeah.
And I thank you so much for taking us along on your journey to mindfulness and sharing with us your inspiration for, you know, getting on the path to mindfulness. And I really believe, I know I'm inspired, and I believe others watching will be inspired about how they can incorporate mindfulness into their daily lives. I have to say, I don't think I've quite been this peaceful at the end of a Talk About It episode, but I feel great. And I thank you so much, Jason. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really enjoyed our conversations. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. And Talk About It family, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to tune in for other Talk About It episodes for better living. I'm Stephanie Powell. Until next time.
Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our Talk About It YouTube channel and turn on notifications. Also, check us out on our social media. Hope to see you next time.